Hereby call this meeting of the Henry County School Board to order. Mrs. Meeks, if you would, with the roll call, please.
Mr. Alker.
Here.
Ms. Berger.
Here.
Ms. Erdich.
Here.
Mr. Bradley. Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Here.
Ms. Whitlow.
Here.
Mr. Bateman.
Here.
Ms. Patel.
All right. Well, the first item we have is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have anything to add, change, or a motion to adopt?
So moved.
All right. Motion by Mrs. Durden. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Brenniger. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you very much. I want to welcome those of you who've braved it to join us this evening, and look forward to having a good meeting. And we will stand for a moment of silence and then Pledge of Allegiance. Do you mind leading that, Mr. Alker, when we get to that?
That's okay.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. We are up to public comment, although Mrs. Meeks has indicated to me that no one has signed up either in advance or at this meeting. So we are now up to the information agenda, which first item is Executive Order 33 update. Dr. Blake Lewis.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the school board. This evening I have for you a slideshow that outlines the current executive order from Governor Youngkin. It's Executive Order 33, cell phone free instruction. I want to present this publicly, not just to you as the board, but also for members of our school family, school communities who may be viewing this board meeting from home this evening, and of course making sure that this information is disseminated far and wide so that there is no misunderstanding or miscommunication surrounding the executive order. I would start with just some basics about the executive order. Governor Glenn Youngkin did issue this order earlier this year. It was in July, I believe, is when it first was issued, to establish cell phone free education to promote the health and safety of Virginia's K-12 students. The executive order is focused on eliminating cell phone use during instructional time and addressing the mental health issues arising from children's social media and cell phone addiction. And that is the language of the executive order. The order further directed the Virginia Department of Education to provide guidance to school boards on cell phone free education policies and procedures. So in August, in fact on August 15th, the Virginia Department of Education issued draft guidelines for cell phone free education. The Virginia Department of Education is currently accepting feedback on this draft, and that feedback will be used as part of their final guidelines that will be issued on September 16th. So from the draft guidance, I have pulled some key pieces of information that I think the public should be aware of. The first piece are guidance definitions. These are defining various aspects of cell phone free education, what it means when these phrases are used. The first phrase is something we are probably familiar with, bell to bell. If you are an educator, you understand that. I think most of our students and our parents understand that concept, but the definition from the draft guidance is somewhat different. Bell to bell means from when the first bell rings at the start of the school day to begin the instructional time until the dismissal bell rings at the end of the academic school day. Bell to bell includes lunch and time in between class periods. So currently, our Henry County cell phone policy does allow for cell phone use in those in-between times of lunch and transition. So the definition coming from the draft guidance at this time would cover those time periods as well. So literally when a student arrives on campus to the time they depart campus, that cell phone would not be accessible. They would not be using the phone. Cell phone free education, there is a definition here as well. It means the age appropriate elimination or restriction of cell phones. And so as we go through, you will see that I have broken out what the VDOE is defining for elementary, for middle, and for high school. The definition of cell phone, I think everyone kind of understands that, but I do want to point out here that cell phone is inclusive of non-smartphones as well. So we know that most of us are old enough to remember the very first cell phone. Mine was actually a bag phone that could do nothing more than dial a number. Those are included in this definition as well. So it's not just smartphones, it's any mobile phone. Other definitions, instructional time means any structured or unstructured learning experience time. So that's where the lunch and the transitions are covered. Instructional time is basically beginning bell of the day to the ending bell of the day. Personal electronic communication device includes smartphones, any item that connects to the internet, to a Wi-Fi network, or any other similar device. And then the definition here that I think is very critical is the definition of the word stored. You'll see this word come up frequently in the guidance, but stored means that a cell phone or personal electronic communication device is not being carried on the student's person. So not in your pocket, not in your hand. It would, and it actually says not, and that also includes the student's pocket. Options that school divisions could choose to define as storage includes, but is not limited to, in the student's backpack, in a locker, in a locked pouch, or in a designated place in the classroom. And so again, I want to remind everyone, this is the initial guidance from the VDOE, but these are those draft definitions that they've provided us at this point. So when we talk about that age-appropriate component, these are some of the guidelines that the VDOE has provided us for cell phone-free elementary. So you'll notice in bold, the very first bullet, that communication devices, cell phones or communication devices will not be used by elementary students within the school building or on school grounds. And you'll see this approach soften as we go through middle and the high school appropriate breakdown. It further says that if a parent decides that an elementary student should bring a phone, that the device must be turned off and stored. And remember that definition of stored, not on your person, not in your pocket, but in a designated area. School divisions must make policies. So that is another big piece, that we are being directed as school board to make a policy that determines cell phone and personal electronic communication device use on buses where elementary students are present. So our policy would then have to go further to say, what is the policy on a school bus? And then students must use school-based communication tools and platforms, whether that's in the office, the classroom, or other centralized location, to communicate non-emergency needs with parents. So basically, if our students are on a device that we issue, whether that be a laptop or an iPad, that if those have a communication platform loaded onto that device, such as Parent Square, that could be used to communicate non-emergency requests between student and parent. And then parents and educators should use school-based communication tools and channels to communicate emergencies and non-emergencies, meaning that we want parents to go through our school office or through our approved platforms to make teachers aware that my student forgot this morning, I'm gonna be sending it to the office, or we forgot to take our medication this morning, I'm gonna drop it by. Whatever that note may be, that rather than messaging the student multiple times during the day, that those messages go through an adult. The next guidance is for middle school. And so it begins with middle school students shall not have a cell phone or personal electronic communication device during the bell-to-bell school day. And so again, I remind you, go back to those definitions of bell-to-bell, and that includes the lunch breaks and transitions between classes. So shall not have a cell phone during that time. If cell phones are brought to school, they must be stored, and again, that definition of stored, and turned off during the school day, the bell-to-bell day. For periods outside of the bell-to-bell, of course, that would mean like if you stay for an after-school extracurricular, you're part of a sports team or a club, there is a provision made here that we make local policies that determine appropriate cell phone device use for middle school students that include before and after for time on school buses and time on school grounds. So obviously if they're staying after for a JV football game on Thursday, the phone could be used, but we will have to give some sort of parameters and guidance within our policy that addresses that. And then students must use the school-based communication tools and platforms to communicate non-emergency needs to parents. So for example, if Bryson forgot his tennis shoes for gym class, he should use the school-based communication tool, which would be Parent Square, or going through the office for the parent to be contacted, not whipping out his personal cell phone and using that to make a call home. Some additional guidance for middle school is that parents should also use those school-based communication tools and channels to communicate. Educators and all co-curricular and extracurricular sponsors must use non-social media based app for communications with students regarding activity and athletic scheduling information during school hours. Now this is something that we have already put in place. I worked this summer with our principals to develop a communication protocol, and we specifically outlined that we do not use our personal cell phones to text with our students or to post on Facebook or have a chain of messages or images going on Instagram or X or any other social media platform. We communicate with students through Parent Square or through a phone call to the parent. And so that has already been addressed with our current practice. And then this additional piece is around the education component. Remember that the first part of the governor's executive order mentioned addressing the mental health surrounding cell phone and social media addiction. So this further direction here is that schools should give middle school students developmentally appropriate guidance and support on the appropriate use of school-issued technology devices, educational apps, educational tools, both for classroom and homework assignments and for educational research purposes. So basically wanting us to add an education component to make sure our students know the proper use of technology and communication devices. For high school, you're going to see a little more latitude show up for high school cell phone free. High school students shall not have a cell phone or personal electronic communication device during the bell-to-bell school day. So that is identical to the middle school. And again, remember that definition of bell-to-bell. If cell phones or personal electronic communication devices are brought to school, they must also be stored and turned off. So again, those definition of stored and what it means to be bell-to-bell. That includes lunch, it includes transitions. Outside of the bell-to-bell instructional time, cell phones and personal communication devices may be used on a high school campus before or after school. So if you arrive on campus at your high school at 7:45, the bell rings at 8:25, 8:30-ish, you have that period of time when cell phone use is permitted. The bell rings in the afternoon at 3:30, You can pull that phone out and use it after 3:30. It is permitted. You may use it outside of that bell to bell. During bell to bell, those students must use the school-based communication tools and platforms to communicate those non-emergency needs to parents. And then a few more for the high school. Parents should also use those school-based communication tools, which is our Parent Square. And then educators and all co-curricular, extracurricular sponsors must use non-social media. So again, our communication protocol that we worked on this summer already addresses that. We have instructed all of our staff to only communicate with parents either by picking up the phone and calling or to use Parent Square to get in touch with them. And then here's a little, the education component again. Schools should give high school students developmentally appropriate guidance and support on use of devices and research with those communication devices and cell phones. So here's the timeline. This is what we're looking at. We received that draft guidance on August 15th. Final guidance will be issued to all school divisions across the Commonwealth on September 16th. Our Henry County school staff is currently working to continue to look at our current policy, aligning it with what's in the draft at this point, preparing for some small adjustments to be made in that draft guidance. And then, of course, the draft policy that we develop is going to be presented to you all at the October meeting for initial review. It might carry over to November if there's some additional information that you all wish to have included in that. But the final policy must be approved by December board meeting because the executive order specifies that it has to be in place for implementation January 1. Which would fall before your January board meeting. So right now, I'm sure that there may be parents in the audience wondering, well, how can I give some feedback on this? Well, this link will actually allow you to do that. So anyone wishing to provide feedback on the draft guidance can use this link. It is a Qualtrics form where you can enter your name, your comments that you would like to have considered. If it's from a student perspective, a board member perspective, a parent perspective, whatever that may be, but this is your opportunity to weigh in on this guidance before it becomes final concerning cell phone-free education in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Are there any questions from board members that I may attempt to answer at this time? Again, for anyone at home who's watching or listening, I want to make sure that we understand this is not just a Henry County policy. This is per an executive order from Governor Youngkin, and this is guidance that is being directed by the Virginia Department of Education at the request of the governor. And so we will have to be in compliance. This is not an optional piece of legislation. It is an executive order, and as such, we must comply. Mr. Hardy, I believe you started to ask a question, and I cut you off.
Yes, Dr. Blake Lewis, you used the word stored a lot during your presentation. What is your recommendation of where the phone should be stored at? Because we gave 4 or 5 different options.
Yes, sir. So staff here at the division level have been investigating various options for that. Of course, the most simple stored option is for students to continue to have it in their backpack. But we have explored options that range from caddies that can be at the front of the classroom to some of the more expensive options that are the secure pouches, so that the student can keep it on their person, but it's locked in a pouch that has a special attachment to it that is snapped shut in the morning, and as students exit the building, they unsnap it at a station, and then it's available for their use. So again, that is something that we will be coming to you as our school board to kind of help us with some guidance in that regard. So we are open at this time, but again, we are pretty much waiting on the final guidance from the VDOE before we make any final call.
And I would definitely want guidance from Mr. Gardner on what liability it is on us if we take it off of their person and put it in a pouch.
Right.
So should something happen to it in that instance.
I know we had, obviously during our work session, we talked about this in detail, and it definitely is not what we had hoped it would say on some things. I am curious if there's any sort of indication, if BDOE will put out recommended consequences, or if that's going to be local policy that we're able to talk about.
I have not heard anything through my channels regarding recommended consequences. I think that is an area that they would leave for us to make that determination.
In this stating its guidance, I just want to be clear, when it states bell to bell, we do or don't have the option to change that during the lunch hour or during changing of classes being guidance.
It will depend on when they
The final.
issue the final version. Right now, because it's draft, I think they're using the word guidance.
Okay.
I think when it's a final version that comes out, I think that it will be much more specific as to you shall or shall not, or you may. I think you interpret those words. Shall and must are very definitive, whereas may gives you latitude.
Right.
So I think we would need to look at the language.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
Definitely encourage the feedback.
Yeah.
Yes, so this link is here. We have publicized this multiple times through Parent Square and through the Henry County Facebook page, and so we will continue to do that after this meeting. But I do encourage anyone who's here this evening to share this information and make sure that folks know that their voice is being heard at this time, but after September 15th, when that final information is provided to us, that is what we will have to operate with. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are next up to proposed revisions to school board policies and regulations. Mrs. Landon.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The Virginia School Boards Association normally issues policy updates twice annually during the first half of the calendar year. This year, there were also a handful of policy revisions issued in August. Revisions can be found in board docs under draft policies, and I'm sharing with you a summary of the changes. Policies BDD, electronic participation in school board meetings from remote locations, and BDDL, electronic participation in committee meetings from remote locations, are being updated to reflect a Virginia Code amendment that became effective July 1st, 2024, requiring school boards to annually adopt each of these two policies. So this is a departure from what we have with previous policies that we've had. GC professional staff is being updated to reflect amendment of Virginia Code allowing the superintendent or school board to recommend individuals for the issuance of a local eligibility license in accordance with regulations developed by the Board of Education and criteria established by law. JEC, school admission, is being revised to reflect options available to school divisions relating to school admission based on kinship care. JO, student records, is being updated to avoid duplication of information in the VSBA policy KBA-E, rights and responsibilities. The remaining two are actually regulations. Regulations, as you know, are developed and issued by the superintendent and shared with the school board to ensure transparency. GCBD-R, regulations for staff leaves and absences, is being revised to reflect the elimination of paper leave forms effective this school year, deletion of summer school leave, and partial payout of unused vacation that was implemented in June of this year. Changes to JHCF-R, regulations for student wellness, reflect recommended revisions that we have received from the Virginia Department of Education. Policy revisions have been verified for legality by the Virginia School Boards Association or legal counsel, and they will be presented to the board for approval at the October 3rd school board meeting. Are there any questions concerning policy revisions?
Not seeing any.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, we are up to the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone wants to pull out, or do we want to adopt as a block?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Sturden, second by Mr. Hardy. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you very much. So now we're up to the action agenda, and we have the approval of additional appropriation for fresh fruit and vegetable program.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. These are one of the items that I enjoy bringing to the board. Marcy Lexa and nutrition staff in her office worked hard on applying for this grant. This grant gives our students in elementary schools the opportunity to have fresh fruit and snacks throughout the week. A lot of fruits that the kids have never tried before, so I think it's a great program. The school nutrition program was awarded $244,350 by the Virginia Department of Education for the fresh fruit and vegetable program for all the elementary schools. An appropriation is needed for the FY 2025 school nutrition budget to cover the expenses for this program, and at this time, an appropriation is being requested. It is the recommendation the school board approve the additional appropriation and forward the request to the Board of Supervisors.
Questions, comments, action items?
Mr. Chairman, we can discuss this after I make the motion, but I move that we approve the additional appropriation to 2025 school nutrition budget for the fresh and fruit vegetable program.
All right. Motion by Mr. Hardy. I will note that Mr. Zaire said this was always his favorite motion, so it's an appropriate one for you. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Mrs. Whitlow. Mr. Hardy, you indicated some discussion. Is there anything you want to discuss
No,
before? You just want to vote, or we talk about it later?
No, I'm fine. I just said we could discuss it after I made the motion.
Okay, I got you. All right, well, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. We're good. Thank you very much. Then the next item on the action agenda, we actually voted on at the last meeting to add to our agenda, which is we had it communicated to us regarding it being formally adopted that we request lump sum funding. Obviously, we've discussed this for many months. We have sent a letter, we have appeared, we have many things. However, one of the requests was that we had not had it as a specific action item formally adopted at a meeting. So that is the background information. Certainly, Dr. Blake Lewis or Mr. Gardner, if you'd have anything you'd like to add to that. Kind of, we've discussed it, covered it. The board's aware. Do we have a motion to formally request and adopt our request for lump sum funding going forward?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Whitlow.
Second.
Second by Mr. Alker. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you very much. And Dr. Blake Lewis, you are already up to superintendent reports.
So the board will be able to access the monthly highlights document under executive content. I did just do a recap of the executive order 33 there with some links for you to access at your convenience. I do want to remind you that we will be paying out the second installment of an approved staff retention and recruitment bonus. That will be $1,000 to Henry County Public School staff, and that will be paid out on the 13th of this month. This is a follow-up from the bonus that was paid back in the spring. This is remaining ESSER funds, which is the source of this bonus, but this is the final bonus to be paid from ESSER funds, as those are sunsetting in the month of September. So we are certainly happy to be able to provide this recruitment and retention bonus for our employees as a final installment from those funds. I do want to remind the board to continue to hold the date of January 22nd for a winter school board retreat. Since we are in our strategic planning cycle, we will need to use that time to kind of catch up on where we are in that process and to bring our board members up to speed on the work that we are doing with that process. The next thing I have for you is my month at a glance. It is going to be a very busy month. I kick off advisory group meetings this month, and so you can see that on September 9th, I'm meeting with student advisory at 11:30. Later that day with the teacher advisory group. On the 11th, I have my Region 6 superintendent's meeting, and that will be in Roanoke. On the 12th, I have parent advisory in the evening, and then on the morning of the 13th, support staff. So we will be going through the strategic planning activities and conversations with each of these advisory groups because the goal of developing that strategic plan is to hear as many voices as possible. And so I felt that it's necessary to have that as part of that advisory group experience this year for each of those groups. And then on the 17th, Mr. Gravely and I will be part of the Piedmont Governor's School Executive Committee meeting, and that meeting will actually be over at Patrick and Henry. Also linked here for board members, I will be holding my beginning of the year meetings with principals, and that is a time for them to share their goals for their school for the year, talk about any of the supports that they may need to make sure that those goals are met. And so the schedule is linked there for you to review. And then also my official visits to schools begin this month. As a reminder to everyone, I do go and spend 1 hour in every school every month. I let the principals determine what that 1 hour will be spent doing. Sometimes it's visiting classrooms, sometimes it's looking at data, sometimes it's visiting with a PLC or a particular grade level, but I do give 1 hour to each school each month, and so the schedule is linked there for you to take a look at as well. I know last year in the spring we started doing some school board member visits to schools, and so if that is something that the board would like to continue with, please let me know, and I am happy to start rolling some dates out for you all to consider for visiting schools as well. The final thing I have on my highlight this evening is, again, the Education Foundation. That is one of the things that the board has asked me to work on this year. So the spreadsheet of names that we have collected is linked here. I do still need your help with identifying contact information for many of these folks. So if you know phone numbers or emails or can provide some context for who this person is, again, remembering I've only been here a little over a year, so some names that may be very common to you are not so well known to me. But if you would do everything you could to update that spreadsheet so that I have information and can start calling these different folks to kind of gauge their interest in helping us with that Education Foundation work, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are up to G for committee reports. No, Mr. Gravely unfortunately couldn't be with us, but Mr. Alker, do you and Mr. Gravely have a committee report?
I think my phone's ringing.
Okay.
At this point, we have not really had a meeting, but we need to go back and we need to evaluate and look at so we understand the curriculum that we had looked at after school.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Alker. Mrs. Whitlow and Mrs. Dirt.
Our Finance and Facilities Committee met this week with Dr. Boone and Mr. Scott. Dr. Blake Lewis already mentioned it. We had the reminder that on the 13th there was going to be the bonus for the contract employees. We went over the open gate for sporting events. They've started rolling out that system. They did it at Magna Vista, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, and they had someone from the company there to try and get all the tweaks out if there was any issues, and it is going very well. We went over ESSER funds. We still have some projects going on, Rich Acres and Stanleytown HVAC projects. And I think that was mostly because of material delay or some sort of contractor delay, but those are in the works and looking on being completed soon, hopefully. And we discussed additional parking spots for ADA at both of the high schools for sporting events. You know, we're moving from allowing people to come in through the gates, so they're providing more parking, and they're providing golf carts for people, and there will be employees around to radio in to the golf carts if needed. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Hardy and Mrs. Brenniger.
Okay, Hours are, it's kind of long, so, and please just be patient. On Monday of last week, I had the pleasure of attending the first meeting of the year of the Special Education Advisory Committee. Due to a very important previous commitment, Mrs. Brenniger was unable to attend. We have communicated several times since. Therefore, Mrs. Brenniger is well informed on the agenda and details of the meeting. Before I get into the Student Conduct Committee report, I want to thank the Martinsville Bulletin reporter, Monique Holland, for covering the SEAC meeting. In fact, it was on the headlines of last Thursday's paper. So thank you, Ms. Holland, for covering the activities of our school system. I would like to mention, though, I did not copy Ms. Holland's article, but they are very similar, though. Okay? So here's my report, and Ms. Brenniger will add on to it. Okay? I attended a special education advisory meeting held Monday, August the 26th. During this meeting, officers for the SEAC for the 2024-25 school term were elected. They included President Andrew McKissick, Vice President Sharon Mullen, Co-Secretaries Elisa Harrison Penn and Lee Orr. Number 2, Andrew McKissick, the president, began the meeting by having each member introduce themselves and provide a brief overview of how they come to join the SEAC. Number 3, which might be the most important, the committee discussed a variety of topics that impact students with disabilities and their families. Topics included post-secondary transition, child find, especially young children, and transition between the building levels at the middle and high school. It was determined that workshops for families would be planned and held, with the first of these being placed for October. Special education in Henry County Public Schools is very dear to me. I am extremely proud of the program that we have. I think it is very effective and efficient countywide. Most of the information I have referred to was provided by SEAC members, as well as committee license Ms. Emily Taylor and Director of Special Education, and Ms. Jeanette Hurd, the Special Education Coordinator. And our next steps would be the October workshops with the families and the November meeting we have with the SEAC.
The only thing I really want to add is that if we can get the word out any extra kind of way, I loved the bulletin being there, and I don't know if we can do any hyperlinks on the county's website for things like this, but getting the word out in the community is going to help grow the committee and what we can offer for special needs in the school system and in the community itself.
Well, thank you very much. So we are up to board celebrations. Normally I start down here with Mr. Gravelin, but Mr. Alker, you're the closest to me tonight.
Okay. Well, I would really like to express a celebration of what happened yesterday. I mean, whether we want to realize it or not, we set history. I mean, I've been on this board for, well, I'm a senior citizen. And, you know, this was discussed when I first came on the board, is to do this, but we never had the funds. Now we have the funds, we're doing it, and we need to get school spirit to the top. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alker. Mrs. Whitlow. All right. Mrs. Dirk.
I will just say I am excited. I am this year the school board representative for the Career and Technical Education Advisory Committee, and we have our first meeting of the year next week. So if anybody has any input or things they would like me to pass on, just let me know.
Sounds great. Mr. Hardy.
Okay, I was going to mention what Mr. Alker said, but Mr. Alker said it very fine, so I don't see any need for me to repeat it. Okay, I meant to mention this at the last meeting, but what company paved the Magna Vista High School student and football parking lots did an outstanding job. The parking lanes are perfect as I see them. Also, the parking lot serves as a practice location for the Warrior Band. I was over there one day at the 1st of August during band camp, and I asked the band director, I said, Mr. Lewis, what are those yellow lines extending about 40 feet down the parking lot? And he told me, those lines are for this band to practice their formation for upcoming competitions. A few days later, I seen a couple of men making other marks in the parking lot. So being curious like I am, I wondered what they were making those marks for. They told me it was for the upcoming bus drivers to train to get their CD license. So we can see this newly paved parking lot serves many purposes besides just parking space for cars. Henry County Schools are to be commended for requiring all teachers to be certified in diabetic training. Many of our students do have diabetic conditions, and it is a great safety measure that our teachers are so trained. In fact, I also recently received my certification for diabetes training through the help of Nurse Gardner and her staff. And the last thing I have, in most cases, I plan to say this at the upcoming board meeting, at least before the meeting. However, we had excuse me, let me get to my final one. That was and the last thing I have to say, we are well into our sport season, fall for sports season. We have great fans and players, but I would remind everyone that we should show positive sportsmanship at home as well as away games. Thank you.
Mrs. Brenniger.
I was going to echo what Mr. Alker said with the field house groundbreaking, but also to Mr. Scott, both fields look great with the football fields. I think we got to see them up close and personal with doing that, and I know we've had issues with the grass, and it looks great, and they're playing on them already, so I think well done, and thank you for working hard on that. I've heard a lot of buzz around some of the administration that's been assigned, and specifically some of the principals. And I know one of the high schools is allowing the seniors to, I think maybe paint or draw their parking spaces, and they're so excited about that. I've heard a ton. I've probably had about 20 kids come up to me in the last 2 weeks saying how excited they were about that. So when you hear things like that, you know that you're just making the right decisions and putting the right people in the right places.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bateman, the floor is yours. I will say anything you want to echo that you're hearing from the folks. You know, floor is yours now.
So I want to bring before the board two things that I have heard from students at Magna Vista. The first one would be about the possibility of starting a prayer group, a student-led prayer group, maybe even some teachers involved, because I know there is a few pastors that even work at the school. And I just wanted to bring that before the board to see maybe what we could do about that, to form a student-led and possibly even teacher-included prayer group. And also, the second thing I wanted to bring up was some of the students' concern for the hat policy that is at Magna Vista, and I would suppose all Henry County schools. A lot of kids, from what I've heard, do not like it. Some kids sometimes have bad hair days, and they need to cover up their wild hair, and so they'll wear hats. But a lot of kids sometimes even get in-school suspension, they get in trouble for wearing a hat, and a lot of kids don't understand why there's a hat policy. They don't really get why it's there, and a lot of kids feel that they should be able to freely wear their hats and wear their hoods, beanies, what have you, head coverings, as they please. So that's just what I wanted to bring before the board today. Just see if we might can find a workaround to this, or find a way to resolve it, or get clarity to the kids.
No. Appreciate you bringing it up. And again, as I've mentioned, the only thing you can't do is motion or vote, but you can talk at any time. So anything else you would like to bring up? And I will note, we all have bad hair days. So.
No, sir. There is nothing else I have to bring up before the board.
I know this is your second meeting with me. I'm always going to try to slide a joke in like that, okay?
All right, I'm here for it.
All right, there we go. Hey, appreciate it. I just want to echo really quickly, it's hard to top, say, a Mr. Alker or Mr. Hardy's comments on, but I was very appreciative of the board all coming out for the field house groundbreakings, and also the support we had phenomenally from the media, the staff here. I know a lot went into making that work well. Thank partners from the board of supervisors, Administrator Wagner, Deputy Administrator Powell, et cetera, for coming out. And of course, I will note, since he didn't get to be there to hear it, I said the eighth Beatle, Mike Gardner, for his support when it's come to the 1% over the years. To quote one of my employees lately, we knew you were there in spirit. So glad to have you back since you missed the last meeting. I had to call you out on that, Mr. Gardner.
Happy to be back.
There we go. See, now I gotta give you the positive and negative. I gotta do them both. But no, just wanted to say it was, as everybody noted, it's such a long-awaited occasion, and a lot of work went into making it a reality. Now I will note, Mr. Alker, I'm older than you, so I've been hearing about this for a long time too on these field houses. But yeah, I just wanted to say again how much that was a great occasion, how much I appreciate all of you making time out to be there, and all that went into it from everybody. And that was the main highlight for me. So the next item we have.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure, yes.
Could I make one more comment?
Absolutely.
I've got, okay, want to welcome Dr. Cobbler here.
Yes.
From the Board of Supervisors, and we appreciate you coming out, and most of the board coming out yesterday, and even Dr. Cobbler helped a little bit in the class at Magna Vista today. So thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah. Thank you for catching that on me there, Mr. Hardy. Anybody got anything else? Okay. All right, so we're up to a reminder of dates, which primarily, the standard monthly meetings, 5:30 from now on since we're in the school year. First Thursdays, October 3rd and November 7th. Conference-wise, the next big one, of course, is, we do have the legislative conference that's coming up next week in Chesterfield for the state, but the November 20th through 22nd annual convention in Williamsburg, which I think most of us will get to attend. So looking forward to those. And then if there is no other actions, we will be up to closed session, if you don't mind scrolling down for me, because I got to read the formal language. 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia for the discussion of appointments and separations of personnel. 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia for consultation with our legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation. 2.2-3711A2 of the Code of Virginia for the discussion and consideration of religious exemptions. Do we have a motion to consider those?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Alker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Brenniger. All those in favor, please.
Keeping these through closed now, right?
Do what?
We're keeping these through closed session now, right? Because they're not passing out papers? Or?
I think that's what we decided the last one, so
Okay.
yes, we'll keep with that.
You're good.